Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're here to pull out the core insights from some pretty complex ideas, making them, well, instantly usable for you. Today we're getting into something that honestly feels a bit upside down in leadership. The idea that real influence, lasting influence, comes from learning how to lead low.
It really is a paradox, isn't it? We're looking at a specific approach here, one built around some really provocative questions and reflective exercises, too, all focused on servant leadership. And if you think humility is just, being polite or saying thanks, well, this discussion might just shake things up a bit.
Yeah, the goal is to frame humility differently. Not as passive, not as weak, but as a core leadership strategy.
Yeah.
And the central conflict, the thing that grabs you right away, is this question: what if those leadership traits everyone seems to admire, the drive for control, the focus on public wins, the self-promotion, what if those are the very things actually killing your influence in the long run?
That's exactly the challenge. So much leadership advice focuses on the outside stuff, skills, results. But this perspective, it forces you to look inside. It argues that real sustainable influence grows from your internal state, from service, from depending on more than just yourself.
Okay, let's dive into those disruptive questions. That you mentioned that clash between what gets praised and what actually works long term. How does chasing the praiseworthy stuff end up backfiring?
Well, the first big question to wrestle with is basically that. What if the things the world applauds, that relentless drive, maybe even a bit of ego, the need to always have the answer, what if those very things pave the road to burnout or isolation?
That definitely connects to the control issue. The material asks, when did control make you feel strong, but looking back, you see it just cut you off? We grab control because, well, it feels safer, right? Cuts down the anxiety, gives a sense of certainty.
And that's the trap, precisely. Yes, control might feel like it lowers risk now, but it absolutely strangles growth. It kills trust down the line. Think about a leader who just won't let go of, say, key client emails or budget approvals. They need it perfect, their way. In that moment, they feel powerful, indispensable even, but they're a bottleneck. They're isolated. There's no shared ownership. And, the second they're out of the picture, poof, the whole thing can fall apart.
Okay, but let me push back a little there. Aren't there times, especially in high-stakes business, where control is needed? For quality, for crisis response. How do you balance standards with letting go?
That's a fair point. It's not suggesting zero accountability. The shift is in the why, the motive behind holding on. And this is why the source material immediately pivots. It shifts from what you do, your actions, to who you are. It asks, how much of your identity as a leader is tied up in your title, your achievements, your output? And how much comes from something deeper, something more solid? Because if your entire sense of self hinges on that next quarterly report, well, you're naturally going to clamp down, you'll over-control. Because failure isn't just a setback, it feels like a personal annihilation.
That really is the core shift, isn't it? Which leads to this idea of valuing what's hidden. What does that even mean for a leader today, valuing hidden obedience more than public success? Sounds like career sabotage.
Yeah, on the surface it does sound risky. But think about it. Hidden obedience, as it's termed here, is about building the unseen foundation. Integrity, capacity. It's doing the hard, often thankless stuff. Mentoring someone quietly. Fixing a process no one else notices is broken. Giving credit away when you could easily take it. See, public success, that feeds the ego. But hidden service, that builds character. And it's that character that holds you steady when the spotlight inevitably moves on.
That implies a serious unlearning process, though. We're kind of conditioned to think authority flows from the job title, the corner office.
Exactly. And this framework insists you have to actively dismantle those assumptions. You have to unlearn them. Authority that only comes from your position, that gets you compliance maybe. But authority rooted in service, in character, that earns genuine influence, loyalty. You have to consciously fight the instinct that leading means commanding. Instead, see your authority as a tool to lift others up, to empower.
Okay, so moving from the why to the how. The material offers tools to diagnose this stuff internally. Let's talk about the humility self-audit. It digs into that tension between wanting recognition and genuinely wanting to serve.
Right, and that tension point, that's critical. It's where you either grow or you get stuck. If you're only serving to get the applause, your commitment is shaky. The questions here are designed to be, well, pretty direct. They force you to ask what's really driving you. But maybe the most revealing one is about how you react when someone else gets the win, the promotion, the praise, the recognition you secretly felt you deserved. What's your gut reaction?
Oof. Yeah, that's a quick mirror to the soul. If your first feeling is resentment or jealousy, well, that tells you something important about where your focus really was. Self-validation, not the mission.
Precisely. And to make it less abstract, there's this tool called the motive analysis worksheet. This gets practical, almost quantitative. You take a recent success, a project that went well, and you have to honestly score percentage-wise what drove you. Was it your sense of calling or mission? Was it pride or ego? Was it fear of what others think, fear of failure? Or was it genuine service to others or the cause?
That's tough. What if a leader does that and finds, say, 50% pride? You can't just fire yourself for having an ego. What do you do with that information?
Good question. The immediate goal isn't perfection, it's awareness. Just knowing that pride scored high tells you something vital. It means your next big decision might be skewed toward protecting that ego rather than serving the mission. You become more aware of your own biases. The worksheet gives you a baseline, something objective to track your internal growth over time, just like you track KPIs for the business.
That makes sense. Objectivity is key. Now, what about this control meter exercise?
Ah, yes. This one zeroes in on delegation, or the lack thereof. It asks leaders to pinpoint, say, 3 specific high-stakes areas. Maybe it's the annual performance reviews, maybe it's allocating the budget, maybe key client pitches, areas where your default mode is to jump in, take over, micromanage, basically control instead of collaboration. Then comes the analysis. Why? What fear gets triggered in those specific situations? And then, crucially, you have to visualize what would actually trusting others look like in practice, step by step.
Okay, give me an example. Let's say I'm a finance director, and my control meter goes off the charts with capital spending request. The trigger is fear of waste or instability. How do I trust others practically there?
Practically, it might mean designing a more robust collaborative process. Instead of just being the final yes-no, trusting others could look like building a system where the team requesting the funds is empowered. They don't just propose the budget. They're trained and given the authority to defend it, manage the associated risks, maybe within clear boundaries you set together. It shifts the burden from only your shoulders to shared accountability. The risk is still managed, but through teamwork, not just your isolated oversight.
That tackles the external process. But what about the internal battle? We often resist being servant leaders. It feels vulnerable, risky.
Absolutely. And there's a check for that too, the internal resistance check. It asks, point blank, what part of you still fights against this idea of servant leadership? And why? What's the root of that resistance? Often it boils down to fear. The fear that pops up when you think about depending more on others and less on your own track record, your own competence, fear of failure maybe, fear of losing your edge, fear of looking weak if you admit you don't have all the answers. Humility, in this sense, is the courage to say, I don't need to be the smartest person in the room.
So diagnosis done, resistance acknowledged. Now for the actual changes. Systemic changes. The metric realignment exercise sounds like a powerful starting point for shifting the whole organization's focus.
It really forces a confrontation with reality. Leaders have to list how they currently measure success. Usually it's things like output, maybe personal awards, size of team, degree of control. Then they compare that list to the metrics suggested by this framework. Things like lives impacted, burdens eased for the team, long-term stability created, the actual quality of service delivered.
Okay, but if my current list has, say, increased market share by 15%, and the new list says lives transformed, those seem worlds apart, especially in a for-profit world. How do you connect those?
You bridge it by redefining transformation in your context. In business, lives transformed could mean things like, what percentage of your team members are growing and ready for their next step? Are you building systems that reduce burnout and turnover? Are you creating a workplace where people feel valued and can do their best work? It's about measuring your leadership impact not just by what you extract from the system profits, output, but by what you build into the system, especially the people.
Right, making it tangible. And to bring that tangibility down to the individual level, there's the service integration challenge, a concrete action.
Yes, and it's deceptively simple, but quite effective. The challenge is pick one area where you have authority, your team, a project, whatever, and this week, commit to doing one invisible act of service. Something that helps the team or smooths the process, but crucially, something you do without any expectation of credit or even anyone knowing it was you. Maybe you clean up the shared digital files. Maybe you quietly fix a recurring annoying issue. Maybe you spend extra time mentoring someone who's struggling without making a big deal of it. The reflection afterwards is key, and it's purely internal. How did doing that, knowing you'd get zero recognition, shift your own mindset, your own motivation?
It recalibrates your internal why, moving from seeking validation to simply contributing. Now, speaking of validation and credit, there's also the credit redistribution exercise. How does that work?
This tackles what happens when recognition does come your way. When you get praised for a success, the exercise forces a pause, a disciplined reflection. You have to consciously identify everyone who contributed to that success, but maybe wasn't mentioned publicly, the quiet analyst who ran the numbers, the assistant who scheduled everything perfectly, maybe even the facilities team who kept the lights on. And then, the crucial step, you plan a specific, timely, and personal way to acknowledge them. Not just a generic thanks team, but real individual recognition. It's about actively redirecting the spotlight.
That sounds like it would build incredible trust over time. Okay, finally, let's get really systemic. Integrating humility into the daily workflow. The source talks about a structure: capture, clarify, and filter. How does this build a humility-driven system?
Right, let's break it down. First, capture. The idea is to get everything out of your head. Not just for GTD-style efficiency, but specifically to combat what the source calls pride-driven control and the fatigue that comes with trying to mentally juggle everything. You sort everything, tasks, ideas, emails, commitments into clear buckets, actionable stuff, things you're waiting for from others, someday maybe ideas. And here's the key addition: a category for prayer and discernment items. This is a built-in step of humility, acknowledging you don't have all the answers and need to seek wisdom or input for certain complex issues, rather than just relying on your own competence.
Well, it's more than just a task list. It's like managing your mental and spiritual load, too.
Okay, then clarify. Clarify is about translating those often vague intentions like improve team morale into concrete, doable next actions, like schedule one 30-minute walk and talk check-in with a team member this week. Humility is practical. It brings lofty goals down to earth, down to specific actions where you can actually serve someone or improve something tangible. No more vague, ego-driven pronouncements.
Makes sense. And then the final gatekeeper for taking on new things, the priority filter: 3 critical questions before saying yes.
Exactly. Before you commit to anything new, you run it through these 3 questions. First, does this truly align with my core mission, my calling? Basic alignment check. Second, and this is the humility check: does taking this on require humility from me? Or is it likely to fuel my pride? Will it make me the hero or serve the greater good? And third, the empowerment check. Should this actually be delegated? Could someone else grow by taking this on? Or am I grabbing it because I want the control or maybe the credit?
Wow, that is a system designed not just for getting things done, but for doing the right things for the right reasons and empowering others along the way. It's about intentional service.
Precisely. It forces you consistently to put service ahead of self.
So wrapping up this deep dive, the clear takeaway is that real lasting influence isn't about the flashy wins. It's built quietly through disciplined, humble actions day after day. It's about making that conscious shift, moving away from a scattered, ego-driven approach towards a focused, purpose-driven clarity that trusts and builds up your team.
Yeah, the promise of this kind of framework isn't quick fame, it's sustainable impact. The kind measured by the positive change you foster, by the integrity you maintain, not just by your job title or the bottom line. It's moving beyond just being competent to being truly transformative.
So as you think about applying some of these, frankly, quite challenging ideas and exercises, we want to leave you with one final thought to chew on, drawn from the source's reflection on legacy. If your leadership impact was measured only by the lives you've genuinely helped transform, the people you've built up, the burdens you've lightened, the trust you've cultivated, completely setting aside your titles and personal accomplishments, how influential would you really be right now today?